Kate is a practicing midwife, a coach, and a facilitator. As a midwife, she worked until recently within a continuity of care team in London. As a coach, she supports midwives and others in healthcare to creatively reimagine their work lives and amplify their distinctive voice. Her book, Flourish, A Practical and Emotional Guide to Thriving in Midwifery, was published in 2023. It opens up a clear map of the rugged emotional landscape of midwifery and invites a deeper awareness of self, purpose, and choice using coaching tools and mindsets. Kate is currently based in Delhi, India, supporting practice development in the Indian government hospital system. So it's with great pleasure I hand over to Kate for our third keynote session of VIDM 2025.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you very much, and welcome to everyone. It's so exciting seeing names and locations from all over the world, and also to hear all those names of midwives as well. So welcome to all of you, whoever you are. I'd just like to reiterate what Ali said there. So whatever role you play, whatever your connection to midwifery, whether you're clinical midwives or educators, midwifery managers, student midwives, I don't think we had any on that list there, but there might be people coming into the room now. Perhaps some of you are birth workers of other kinds. There might be obstetricians coming in, or there might be traditional birth attendants or doulas. Whatever your connection to midwifery, you are so welcome. And we know that merely existing as midwives and birth workers is a radical act, and it's a political act as well. So today, this morning, this evening, whatever time it is for you, we're going to look at the next radical step, which is flourishing and staying connected, along with the theme of today, in the heartbreak and also in the hope. So Ali's got my slides there, so she's moving them on for me. Thank you to you. You are the midwives and birth workers, and you are living the heartbreak, sometimes on a daily basis. And I include myself in that, are the advocates for hope. And of course, advocate means someone who argues for or recommends a cause or the cause of another person. So if that resonates for you right now, maybe you can just give a nod behind your screen. I can't see most of your faces, but yeah, I'm an advocate. Or if you're with someone else, a couple of you were, turn to them and say, you are an advocate for hope. So that's who we are, isn't it? And I'm just inviting you at this early point in the session to come as you are, come tired, come tender, come excited, come overjoyed that we get to celebrate today a profession that is marginalized around the world. So who am I? I'm a UK midwife, as Ali said, have reasonably recently, about 18 months ago, come from London, now living in Delhi, but working in Uttar Pradesh in India, helping to strengthen labour room practices. And I'm just about to finish a master's in global maternal health with the City St George's University of London. And I'm also a coach and a facilitator. And my work has been very much about reconnecting women to their sense of self, their sense of purpose, and how that purpose connects with what they want to do in the world. So I've continued that by working with midwives and nurses. And the book came out of that ability to connect the two pieces, what it means for midwives to reconnect with who they are and then move on, either within midwifery or somewhere else, but more alive as a result. So all of this obviously deeply informs who I am as a midwife and how I view the profession and how my perspective grows over time. So a little bit more about Uttar Pradesh, where I'm working on the next slide. And some of you may know the geography. I'm working in an industrial suburb of Delhi, but it's actually in the next state. It's a huge state and it's home to sadly, a third of India's newborn deaths. So what I'm doing is part of a WHO implementation research study in 4 countries, working on immediate kangaroo mother care, so skin to skin care immediately. But my work is upstream in the labour room, trying to support a reduction in what are often routine practices of augmentation with either oxytocin or misoprostol, also fundal pressure and episiotomy, things that are ultimately harming babies. And many of you will know, I noticed there's someone else who's also come into the room from India as well, that there is a background in India of violence against women, strong gender-based violence generally, which then of course has its impact on the hierarchies and the systems within hospital settings. And you may also know that in India, there has been a big push towards midwifery, and it's been relatively high profile. There is a dream to be training 86,000 midwives by 2030. And this is beginning to happen very, very slowly. We know it takes time to train midwives, doesn't it? And so it is happening. It's just happening slowly. And while we wait for that and contribute to it, I hope, we are supporting nurse midwives, so obstetricians, nurse midwives, ward ayahs, intrapartum nurses, essentially, who get to do this crucial work every single day with very, very high volumes. So that's just a little bit of context about where I am. And then we're going to talk about why this theme today. So obviously the ICM theme is midwives critical in every crisis. So that's the sort of broad view of today. What does it mean to be in a fragile world and to be midwives in the crisis, which of course we are? And I've chosen 2 pictures here, one in Gaza on the left there and one in South Sudan. And of course, these are pictures that represent many other situations in many other countries. I could have chosen other places, but they represent just how vital that knowledge and that persistence in advocating for women and birthing people is around the world, especially in the midst of fragility and crisis. And we also honour and acknowledge our Afghan colleagues who are having to operate in almost impossible circumstances just to educate their students and to educate their doctors as well as midwives and nurses. And I know session 14, if anyone wants to go back to it later, is run by some Afghan midwives. So where I come from in the UK, midwifery has been vilified by the press for trying to support physiological birth within a midwife-led care context. So essentially trying to support evidence-based care. And there is an identity crisis in midwifery in the UK because the induction rate is rising up to 40% plus, and the cesarean rate is rapidly following it to above 40 to 50%. And of course, what happens when outside influences, what happens, on the outside starts to influence how we feel on the inside. So the crisis on the outside is reflected within a crisis on the inside. And when we begin to practice in a way that doesn't align with who we are as midwives, that crisis escalates. It creates this internal confusion. And the political situation kind of parallels this. The WHO is saying we need more midwives. We need to train greater numbers of midwives. And the UN agencies are following with that narrative. And yet smaller numbers of midwives are able to remain in the profession because of lack of pay, lack of resources, lack of mentors, or as we're seeing here in India, very small numbers of newly trained midwives struggling to be midwives, partly because of the deeply hierarchical nature of the entrenched medical hierarchies here. So crisis looks different, right, in different settings, but it's deeply felt everywhere. So we get to spend some time together today, staying connected in the heartbreak and the hope. And we're going to be acknowledging the heartbreak. That's really important. we're going to be pointing to the hope, and we're going to think about what it means to take action together. This is not a solo activity. And we'll also call to reconnect. So connection goes to, what does it mean to reconnect with purpose, power, our body, and our breath? And for each of us as individuals to name that next tiny step that we might take as advocates to support ourselves, to support the profession, and then possibly to support colleagues as well. So there is a psychological crisis within. And the next slide shows an image of this little cutout. I am not cut out for this. So the book that I wrote came out of the deep, dark winter of early 2021, when the Delta wave of COVID was sweeping across the UK, and we had many, many more very unwell women and babies as a result. And I encountered so many midwives in this psychological crisis saying, I'm not cut out for this. I am too tired, too confused, too long in the tooth, you know, too many years of midwifery, too new to this, too tender, too sensitive to go on doing this, when no one seems to be really asking me how I am. When what was actually going on was unacknowledged traumatic stress. So what the midwives believed was happening was, I'm not cut out for this. I'm not right for this profession. But actually, it was unacknowledged traumatic stress, deep, deep in the heart of what midwives were feeling. So this inspired me to write this book, because what I knew and what I know now is that it's these invisible injuries that harm us. So I wanted to give a language and a map to the psychological realities and challenges of the day-to-day. And I knew that there was research out there in military field, in general psychology field, and also in emergency medicine, but it wasn't being translated into midwifery. So midwives were left adrift, as it were. They had no map. So we made a map called the 5 mega mountains of moral injury, compassion, fatigue, burnout, trauma exposure, and PTSI, and used it as a way for midwives to relate their own experiences to what was happening and relate it to what's known and said and described in the research at the same time. And my aim was not just for midwives and student midwives to say, oh, it's not just me, this is a thing, it's real, but also for midwifery educators and for midwifery leaders to be able to say, I have a language with which I can communicate with my people, so I can relate to them and support them, empathize, and also be practical in terms of strategies for support. It's also filled with what if moments, passages of hope and ideas for systemic and structural change, which will also help with these psychological challenges along the way. So this is the action that I took at the time. And one of the reasons for that was because midwives were saying, I'm feeling all this stuff, but I just don't know how to articulate it. So one of the very first things that midwives and student midwives in particular have related to with the book is moral injury. And I'm just going to show you a little bit about a couple of these mega mountains, as they're called, just to see your reactions as well. So moral injury is when we're unable to first meet our basic principle of do no harm, or in our terms, as midwives, very often be truly with woman or birthing person. And yet, when external circumstances, excessive workloads, and in many countries of the world, that's really extreme, when policies or procedures lead us to prioritize tasks over human dignity, we get into that territory of moral distress or moral injury. And of course, being forced or just falling into the pattern of doing too much too soon, or being constrained to do too little too late, is a cause of moral injury as well, because it's like being unable to intervene when we need to, or not intervening when we ought to. And many of you can immediately conjure up situations where that's happened to you. So, for example, not being able to support the start of breastfeeding in a healthy way because we have to rush people to another area, or where we are in a very public labour room doesn't feel like it's culturally appropriate to be supporting feeding in that way. Whatever the circumstances, that cumulatively over time can cause moral injury. The requirement to do a vaginal examination at 3 a.m, despite the fact that we suspect that this woman might be a survivor of childhood or adult sexual abuse, as is true of so many women. And yet we do it anyway because it's expected by our seniors, or because that's just what we do. That's a cause over time of moral injury. They're just a couple of examples, but you've got your own. And I'm not looking at the chat right now because I know if you've got questions, you're going to be able to ask them at the end, but maybe you have examples that you want to add to the chat so that others in the group, in the room, can see them. And of course, COVID, the pandemic, made moral injury much more visible, preventing partners from entering. And I know some of you have to do that on a daily basis wherever you are in your home, situation, but preventing people from entering, partners from being with women during COVID, was a really, really tough part of the challenge of the time. And I'm just going to highlight the illustration on the right here. This is a midwife on one side of the rock and a birthing couple on the other side. And this is a representation of what's happened in the UK, where there's so much documentation, monitoring and documentation in the name of preserving safety, that it is driving a dehumanized wedge between the couple and the midwife. And of course, in your setting in India, for example, it might be that the workload is so excessive that a wedge is driven between nurse midwife and birthing woman, because she's saying, well, how could I possibly communicate what needs to happen next to her, or at the very least ask for consent when I'm so pressed with so many women giving birth at the same time, which is a justifiable thing to say, and yet it's driving a wedge. So it's more than complicity, moral injury. It's actually feeling powerless to prevent harm. That's right at the heart of it, when we feel powerless to prevent harm. And globally, this sense of powerlessness to prevent connects us. And it might be that you relate to that. The next slide shows us trauma exposure. And this is a very broad theme, of course. It's about those ongoing difficult events in people's lives that we're encountering all the time. We're hearing about them, people's situations, people's families. We're witnessing traumatic events, but we're also witnessing or supporting colleagues who are experiencing suffering. And it's sometimes about the stories as well, right? As midwives, we're great storytellers, but those stories can have consequences where they continue to just pour out. And we accumulate them. We accumulate them in our bodies. We accumulate them in our minds. And we begin to be shaped by them. So trauma exposure goes beyond those big events, those objectively major events, but it also includes those events. So it includes those events from which we might be reeling, where we're at risk of PTSD with often visceral flashbacks or nightmares. And just, of course, in these cases, as women can experience really traumatic events relating to their birth, but report no post-traumatic symptoms because they feel that they were listened to and respected and cared for, and someone took charge just at the right moment, and they felt somehow a measure of emotional safety in the midst of it all. That same thing can be true of us as healthcare professionals. And it can also go the other way too, of course. So it's not so much about the nature of the event, but the nature of the human response in the moment, which governs how our brain responds in the longer term. And one of my great aims is just enabling midwives to recognize what's normal in terms of the brain's reaction to a dramatic event or a traumatic event, and to know when it's gone beyond normal and when they need to seek help. And you can see the picture here is a midwife speaking to her senior and saying, like, where were you when I needed help in my time of need? And her senior pointing to the grayed out figures in the background going, yeah, like they weren't there for me either. Like I didn't feel like I had the support that I needed. So as midwives, nurse midwives, as student midwives, this is what we need, right? For it to be articulated, clear, and for us to know what's normal and who and how we can go for support. So all of this is accumulating, the moral injury, the trauma exposure, and into that place of burnout. And my next slide just highlights the fact that burnout is not, I'm feeling exhausted, although adrenal fatigue is part of it. Instead, it's a classified, recognized, WHO recognized, and ICD recognized occupational hazard. It's real, it's not made up. And it involves all these depleted feelings and builds over time. And it was Leah Hazard, the Scottish midwife, who said that thing at the bottom, it's not created by a sudden fiery blaze, but a series of burning fires over time. And a Swedish group of midwives in 2022 put together a burnout assessment tool specifically for midwifery. But there is work to do for all of us to create burnout assessment tools that will support us in different cultural contexts. Because again, just vital to be able to be articulating this regularly. Where are you on this validated tool? How are you feeling now? What does it mean for your next steps? Where can we, support you and rotate you so that these feelings can diminish and we can restore you to some level of energy, but also connection to your work all over again. So midwifery is emotion work, as we all know, and that heart there displays some of the areas of emotion work that we have to tackle on a daily basis. And the wonderful Billy Hunter and colleagues have been writing on emotion work since about 2005. So some of that I was trying to bring more into visibility through the book, but we could also be adding to these by talking about incivility as emotion work, structural and relational racism, casteism, hierarchies, including medical power structures, and also the dynamic of changing teams on sometimes a daily basis. All of this is emotion work in midwifery, and it's something that, because we're so deeply in it, we don't always recognize as emotion work. So a little pause for all of us to ask this question. Do we recognize moral injury, trauma exposure, and burnout symptoms in your midwifery life? So maybe you can give me a heart reaction for a yes and a thumbs down reaction for a no. And if anyone is saying no, I am delighted. I'm just looking for the reactions. What are you seeing, Ali? Are you seeing any reactions there? It might just be because I've turned the chat off.
Yes, lots of hearts.
Oh, lots of hearts. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Lots of hearts. Are there any thumbs down?
Not yet.
Okay.
Someone else is saying moral injury example, assembly line models of care, mimicking factory production where efficiency is the greatest good, being inappropriately applied to relationships of care.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been many a thesis on that, right? And it continues to be done. In fact, it becomes more and more industrialized, the model of care that we're expected to work within. And it becomes more and more normalized over time as well. So it sounds like you're all recognizing this. That's really helpful to know, because as we move on, we're going to look at resilience. And resilience has been given a bad name over the last few years. It's been considered like a solo act. Are you resilient? Are you resilient enough to do this work? Are you taking steps to be resilient? However, true resilience is about building self-awareness in the first place. Who am I as a midwife? Who am I as a person? What are my personality traits that might make me more vulnerable to symptoms of burnout, or to feelings of moral injury, or to PTSI indeed? And it's about building self-compassion as well. Part of the self-awareness piece is also thinking, well, what was my purpose in getting into this in the first place? Which area of midwifery do I love to work in, and why? How does that connect with my passions in the rest of life? What makes me feel alive, right? All of these things are part of self-awareness, and they help us to be compassionate when certain things are not suiting us. So that's one thing. Choosing vulnerability over armor is a huge subject. We could spend a whole morning talking about that. And vulnerability, again, is painted sometimes as a weakness, but actually is such a strength to speak vulnerability, to say, I'm needing this, I'm feeling this. And if, as midwifery leaders, we can do that, and do it with student midwives, and do it with our colleagues and our peers, then we begin to transform the culture of the systems we're working in. So showing up with that softness in systems that are almost designed like the factory line to harden us is such a radical act in itself. And I'm guessing just the fact that you're here, you're probably, desiring that, or you're that kind of midwife in the first place. Reflecting is important too, and finding your people to reflect together. And not just that, but to find the people with whom you can begin to mobilize. Because we know that action is an antidote to burnout. We know it from the research, we know it from people's empirical experience, and we also know that, if possible, choosing the setting and type of midwifery work that helps you to be most yourself. And that's not possible for everyone, I know, but if you can, finding a way to do that and really becoming an advocate for yourself in that makes a massive difference. And when I say flourish, and when I talk about resilience, I am not talking about sunshine and, smiley emojis and that kind of soft stuff. I'm talking about grieving, but grieving together. I'm talking about daring to believe that joy and rage and love and loss can all be there together, and we can talk about all of it. And they can be side by side, just as we are side by side. And none of this is an individual pursuit. All of it is collective. And that's what's different about the old view of resilience. This is a collective resilience, and it's about beginning to reshape the systems, so structural and systemic change at the same time. So working out what works for your mental health obviously is a vital part of this. You are amazing. You really are. And it's totally inspirational for me as a midwife to see you leaning in and saying, how can I use this to support those around me, but also just to propel the profession into a better place. And I know, because I've felt it myself, that most of the time you feel unseen in amongst the 2.2 million midwives in the world, and in the UK, probably 43,000 midwives. They're not huge numbers compared to nursing, but you may often feel unseen. So part of this is saying, I see you, we see each other. So what does keep us going? Well, the purpose that we came into midwifery with. And maybe you can remember what that was. If you can't, then you might, after this session, want to just jot that down, or have a little think about, what was it? What was the burning fire in me that really brought me in, that gave me the impetus in the first place? And what would it mean to reconnect to that? The power. So that is whatever we're reclaiming. And that might be a big thing, like fighting for midwife-led care, or a tiny but vital thing, like giving the woman the dignity that she deserves in that moment. So whatever we fight for, our power and our reconnection to that power can keep us going. Our body, where we live, where we inhabit, and feeling our bodies, like noticing when we need to express that we don't know, or we are feeling vulnerable. And using our breath, the thing that sustains us, of course, and the thing that supports us to care for women and birthing people. And then finally, action definitely keeps us going. And I'm going to get you to think of one tiny thing you would love to help make happen within your service or your practice. So we're going to do a little breath awareness exercise to almost finish us off this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are. And this is really about the breath awareness. It's about coming back to our breath and back to our ability as midwives or birth workers to be in our bodies, present, undistractable, aware. And this will do the most for our day-to-day holding of that tension between heartbreak and hope, and also the holding of space for ourselves and for our clients as birth workers. So I want you to place your feet flat on the ground if you're sitting, and if you're standing, great, just feel your feet. So wherever you are, begin to just feel the edges of your feet, just to reconnect with that feeling of grounding. So feeling the front and the back and the sides of your feet, all four edges. And then beginning just to notice the rhythm of your breath. And noticing the rise and the fall of your chest. Enjoying that sensation of allowing the body to do what it most wants to do. And lower your eyes or close your eyes if it helps you just for these few minutes to focus and enjoy. And I want you to imagine yourself now with those feet connected to the ground as a tree, with your roots woven into the earth, deeply embedded in the soil of who you are and what you know as a midwife or birth worker. So allow your feet to really feel that. The deep roots that you have, and the way in which those roots interconnect with the roots of other trees, other midwives, and what that means. Just like trees communicate with each other and give early warning systems, we get to do that too. We signal when something's needed, and we bring comfort and release to each other. So once again, just noticing your roots here and how deep they are. So even when the soil is not feeling as hydrated or as rich as we want it to be, our roots are deep. So just feel the effect on your body as you sense those roots beneath you, allowing your breath to come, and as the out breath comes, dropping your shoulders and softening your face. And then noticing what it feels like to extend your arms up as the branches of your tree, knowing that on those branches there are leaves and there is fruit. And it's the depth of connection in that soil, the depth of awareness, the connection to faith, to your family, to your values that holds you. Those roots represent all that. And when the wind comes, when the storm comes, you're held fast. And from those roots comes all the nutrition that enables your leaves and your fruit to blossom. So just notice what it feels like right now to experience that you are a fruitful tree, that you have power and purpose as a midwife. and that you stand tall as you advocate for others and for yourself. Just notice what that does to your breath. And smile to yourself and say internally, I get to do this. And slowly, gently begin to come back into this room, moving your fingers and toes and bringing your awareness fully back here. So here we are back in the room, just about to bring all this to a conclusion. And we're going to move to us together, connection as medicine. So welcome back, and just look at those people on that screen in China, in the South Pacific, in Bangladesh, and also in Coventry and Warwickshire in the UK, both nurses and midwives there, all representing this global community of midwives. Community is an antidote to burnout, just as action is an antidote to burnout. And I, for one, am so grateful for the communities of midwives I find myself in, and grateful to Virtual International Day of the Midwife for creating this community as well. You are really rather beautiful. And there's the tree with its fruit, representing who you are. And I hope if you go away with nothing else from today, you go away with that sense in your body of your stature and the significance of you as a midwife and the profession that we're in. So closing today is really an invitation. It's an invitation to grasp gratitude and to play with it and to experiment with that notion of we get to do this rather than we've got to do this. Just try it on. Try on connecting with your purpose, as I suggested, with really coming back into your body in between appointments, or as you support a labouring woman, coming back to your breath and coming back to each other. Maybe start a reflective circle or something that enables you just to express how you're feeling. And a few questions. What's one thing you want to remember? Who or what will you advocate for this week? And who will you reach out to for support for yourself? So you might want to take a photograph of that slide just so you can remember those questions, and you've got things that you can pick up and reflect on in idle moments after the session or at a later point in the week. So in terms of resources, I would love you to get in touch with me. That's my Instagram is a logical place to go, but you can also get me via the website. And if those of you who are in countries where resources are scarce, if you would like to get access to a copy of Flourish and we can support you in that, then let me know and we can talk about how best to manage that and to give you what you need. So thank you so much for being here and for being who you are as midwives. And if I've got time and you have some questions, I'd love to answer them.
Thank you so much, Kate. I feel like I just need some space to digest and take in all that you've said. I just want to read some of the comments in the chat, as I'm aware you might not be able to see them. Beautiful presentation. Thank you for this uplifting talk. Inspiring and empowering. What a blessing to wake up to your talk this morning. Connection is live in nature and in our nature. I don't know if anybody does have any questions for Kate. A lot of the comments are mainly observations within practice and own personal experiences. Celine says, we're expected to agree to protocols. Sometimes EBM is manufacturing consent, no personalised care possible.
Yeah.
And
So
another
true.
one from Liz, the problem is also being expected to get women to agree to protocols and procedures which are not evidence-based and will result in harm, while failure to do so is seen as failing to provide safe care to women. Blame
Mm,
couched as called to account.
yeah. Yeah.
I think
And just,
that's strength in itself, isn't it? Hearing that other midwives across the world are feeling the same and can maybe offer some resilience to each other.
yes. And just naming it sometimes helps to take it out of that place of loneliness and into more of a collective space where we can go, yeah, it's there, it's happening. How do we begin to look after ourselves in that difficult context, but also how do we begin to mobilize with each other to take, and I'm really into this next small step, one small step, and that's it. Don't try and take on the world, but what might your next small step be?
I think there's an oversounding of applause from our participants. The comments certainly are giving that feel. So a
Suzanne has asked a
huge.
question, if there's time just to answer that. She said, I like the idea of grieving as a way for resilience. Did I understand well? Thank you, Susanna, for the question. Yes, that grieving together, actually actively expressing how we're feeling, not just let's have a cup of tea, or sometimes in the UK context, an alcoholic drink. It's quite common amongst midwives. We'll go to the pub and, we might talk about midwifery, but let's numb it a bit, either with a very sugary cup of tea or a drink. And somehow that never quite gets us into that place of what if we were to just be very authentic in expressing our grief, which then is healing, and it mitigates against a lot of these symptoms.
Yeah, thank you. I'm conscious of time and that there is another session starting in 10 minutes that people need to get prepared for.
Yeah.
So I again want to reiterate my thanks for Kate, but also to all of you for supporting this session as well as the wider work of the VIDM. Thank you very much for attending and being with us in communion today.